Welcome to Blaze News, The Mandate. I'm Jill Savage. Matthew Peterson is still out, but don't fear. Our D.C. correspondent, Chris Bedford, is still here. How's it going?
That's great. I'm happy to be here. I'm like cooler, more fun Matt. I'm like Uncle Matt. Comes in and gives the kids explosives.
Every now and then we have to switch it up, keep everybody on their toes. And that's what they're doing right now in Washington, D.C., too, because Kash Patel, he's out there claiming that he has some smoking gun proof. The FBI buried a report showing that China schemed to game the 2020 election with all the fake driver's licenses. Now, what's the bombshell? Well, former FBI Director Chris Wray may have misled Congress by downplaying or hiding some of that intel. And now we're all wondering, well, what else is he maybe sweeping under the rug? So Oversight Project President Mike Howell, he's trying to get to the bottom of it, and he joins us right now. So Mike, one of our favorite guests to have on the show because you have so much information. But our Joe Hanneman actually wrote a story about this on theblaze.com. He was listing your allegations there of Wray in the piece there. So can you start by just taking us through some of those allegations right now against Christopher Wray?
Yeah, well, first off, they're beyond my allegations. The current FBI director and deputy director have said out loud into the whole world on X that the previous leadership, to mean Christopher Wray, covered up these materials and misled Congress for political reasons. So what we're doing is coming in and providing kind of the evidentiary backing of what statutes that implicates and how it was, allegedly illegal. And it's pretty obvious to me. There was a mountain of evidence that was circulating around the FBI as to this election interference plot by China and the production of a ton of fake IDs that were scannable for the purposes of interfering with the election through mail-in ballots. And it was, pinging on all levels over at the FBI. So it's unfathomable that Christopher Wray did not know about it. And in his very, careful answers to Congress under oath, refused to acknowledge it and instead did the exact opposite. And I believe that's criminal in nature. And so that's why we referred him over to the FBI and DOJ. And the same goes for this Catholic memo, the infamous memo, which Wray said was just an isolated one-off. Well, new information release says that absolutely wasn't the case. It was sent to well over 1,000 people in the FBI, and there were various iterations of it. And so this looks like a coordinated scheme to withhold information from the American people through Congress, which can be criminal.
Now, he said in his testimony that there was no evidence of widespread attempts to change the election by China or any of the foreign powers. Were these attempts widespread? We talked about them a little bit when it first was revealed that all these different IDs were coming in, but were they widespread? And who were the intended recipients of these fake American IDs?
Chinese immigrants and nationals who couldn't vote in the elections.
College students?
Right. For the express purpose, according to the intelligence report, of supporting candidate Joe Biden. And so if 20,000 fake IDs doesn't count as widespread, I'd love to know what does. Clearly, in the context of all the controversy leading up and after the 2020 election, this was highly relevant. And it's the same kind of modus operandi that the FBI had in failing to clarify the Hunter Biden laptop being authentic, which they knew was authentic. And we know why they didn't tell the country. And it's the same reason they didn't tell the country about the Chinese fake IDs. It's because they didn't want to release anything that was directionally helpful to President Trump and his supporters. And this is the pattern of the FBI over years. And it is beyond just politics. This is criminal in that you got to be honest when you're asked, Congress asks for information, you're giving answers under oath and obstructing some of the several investigations that flowed from Congress. This information should have been out. I'd love to hear what the excuse for it not getting out is. And I believe there's a lot more to come as to why they did not release it. And I take the director Patel at his word that the leadership covered it up. And so we're coming in as the Oversight Project saying, well, that's really interesting, but it's also really criminal. And so we want to move from beyond just the oversight and transparency stage, which is great, but to the actual accountability stage. And I think the rest of the country wants to see that too.
That whole Hunter Biden thing, it read like an I think you should leave skit. That's not my laptop. And you're finding naked pictures of you smoking crack. It starts to look pretty guilty. Like maybe it is your laptop unless someone else has those. But the interesting thing that stands out to me on this is so there's 20,000 that were found or so. Fake IDs being sent to Chinese college students and other people who are here. which makes you wonder, if I'm in a foreign country and I'm getting fake papers sent to me by my government, there's not instructions in there, take this and go vote remotely to try and change the trajectory of this election. It's got to be something else. It's understood by the recipients that they're going to be getting fraudulent documents that are meant to do something fraudulent. So that seems to cast a lot of suspicion on Chinese citizens who are here.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I mean, if you're leaving China, you can't leave without the permission of the CCP. And so definitionally, the vast majority of non-citizen Chinese in the United States, and even some citizens, are under the thumb of the CCP still. And that's why it's so problematic. We have such a large student population of people who are under the thumb of the CCP. They're beholden to China and the CCP. It is that obvious. And the same plays out with Mexico. I mean, Mexico and a lot of Mexicans in the United States, whether citizens or not, still have their primary allegiance to Mexico. That's why you saw the president of Mexico freaking out so much about mass deportations and the rest. It is part of their political environment, which extends beyond their border, and their citizens who maintain their primary allegiance will act upon those wishes and desires, and it manifests in American politics all the time. And it's frankly the Democrat Party's base. It is a lot of foreign nationals, people with extra American allegiances.
All right, let's get to the Autopen. That's what we always do with you here on the show. And there were big updates yesterday. We actually got testimony. Neera Tanden admitted that she was using the Autopen. She told Congress that she was authorized to do it, except there's a problem that nobody knows who actually signed off on all of this. And we should note that Donald Trump gave he waived executive privilege to make sure that she could testify freely. So let's just start with what stood out from her testimony yesterday.
Yeah, so I'm super glad to see that President Trump waived executive privilege. Obviously, we've been calling that for a long time because that's what President Biden did to former Trump advisors in the January 6th context. A great move by the Trump White House there. What I was looking for in Neera Tanden's testimony was whether she was going to go down with the ship or not. And I think she did something in the middle. She's got one hand on the sinking ship and the rest is in the water, so to speak. She basically said, as staff secretary, the person in charge of the paper, the guy, Will Scharf, you see always with President Trump right now, handing him the documents to sign. That was Neera Tanden's job. And we see Will Scharf all the time on TV. And she said something that shocked everybody, that she had minimal interaction with President Biden. And she never did not get his authorization prior to directing use of the Autopen. She relied on a paper process where she sent decision memos up the chain that were then initialed by President Biden and came back down the chain to her, and then she put the Autopen into motion. So that is a blaring red siren saying that the person operating the Autopen had no indication that the president actually signed off on it, let alone was capable of signing off on it. And so it confirms the core thesis of our Autopen investigation and what set this all into motion. Second, she's still trying to save a little face. She was arguing there, briefly at the microphones afterwards that there was no coordinated effort to hide President Biden's decline, which if you're 99.9% of the rest of the country, you have to laugh at because that's what happened for 4 years. Everyone saw it, and it resulted in Biden having to drop out of the presidential race after he malfunctioned for 2 hours on the national stage in the debate.
Now, with this Autopen, I'm just so pessimistic that there are ever really responsibilities, that there's anything more than investigations, and Oversight chairman or whoever will go on shows and they'll talk about it and they'll fundraise off it and they'll say, vote for us in November if you want to see a change. But they're in power right now. Is there a soft spot? Is the pardons the soft spot for the president, where an actual specific constitutional duty that's not delegated to the executive, it's delegated to one person? It's a very special responsibility. If that's fraudulent, where is the possibility, if there even is one, of people actually going to prison over this, or orders or pardons being undone?
Yeah, there's definite possibility. I share your skepticism of accountability actually happening because we've never seen it, for this type of activity. The Republicans particularly never even get close to getting it. Democrats have no problem getting their version of accountability. But there's a few soft spots. You're right. The pardons are the clearest thing that only the president can do. And given all of the funny business that happened in the final days, it's awfully difficult for people to believe that President Biden actually approved those Autopen funky pardons, particularly with all the other evidence we put out. And so testing those pardons by charging the recipients of the funky no good pardons is the way we've been advocating to go, which means Schiff, the January 6th committee, Milley, Fauci, et cetera, you name it. Any of the people who got the Autopen pardons in the last, 48 hours of administration are great targets. Another great target set is the criminal culpability of people who were running the White House, unconstitutionally and criminally. And we've put out in the Blaze several statutes this implicates. There's impersonation of a federal official, forgery. I think bribery has to enter the mix when you have trillions of dollars leaving the White House through those inflation-busting bills that Podesta and everyone else were just doling out of the White House, who the recipients, think of the EPA gold bars off the Titanic. And so, yes, it is both unconstitutional and probably criminal once we figure out the exact mechanics of how they're running this. And to do that, this needs to only be the beginning with Neera Tanden. If you got one of the capos in, you got to move up to the lieutenants and the generals. And lucky for us, we know who those people are. It's pretty obvious that the names that have been put out there. Anthony Benral, the First Lady's work husband, is now playing games about coming in. But let's not forget, Jake Tapper, Alex Thompson. They wrote the book. They say they have 200 sources, and they know something we don't know. So Congress has got to get them in and ask them and just build out this record so people can be prosecuted.
So is that how it looks? It comes down maybe to a judge. The Department of Justice prosecutes some of the people who were pardoned, and then when the pardon's brought up, make the case that the pardon was illegitimate. Is that how consequences would look?
Yep, that's exactly right. We'll call that testing the pardon in court, because obviously Schiff's going to go there and say, I got a perfectly good pardon for all of my criminal deeds. And then the government will say, no, you don't. And here's why. And then a judge will decide. But that's one avenue. There's still others about all the money that left and the lasting legal impact of other decisions and the criminal culpability of people who covered up the fact that the president wasn't running the White House.
All right, Mike Howell, greatest hits. We have to cover illegal immigration. This is the other wheelhouse that we talk to you all the time about. And you posted something on X saying that the House Appropriations Committee is trying to kneecap Trump's mass deportation. So what's happening? Tell everybody right now.
So the House Appropriations Committee had quite a hearing and where they moved out their version of the appropriations bill that'll control immigration policy in the U.S. and they gave away the farm. It's the Approps Committee is full of some of the most liberal left-leaning Republicans there are, and they did things to hamstring the ability to deport anybody that's not a criminal. They basically laid out Obama and Biden policies of immigration resources have to be applied to only a very small subset. So in other words, no mass deportations. And that's what they basically put into the appropriations law. They also did other things that basically just seems like they were watching CNN and trying to calm CNN down. They're saying, we won't go for ICE operations in sensitive locations like courts, which is just ridiculous because these illegal aliens, that's where we know they'll be sometimes. And so that's the job of ICE to get the illegal alien. And so they're just reacting to the furthest left criticism and trying to legislatively cut the knees of a mandate item, which is already, facing a lot of headwinds with some of the, frankly, shifting priorities of the administration itself. And so this is where rubber will meet the road when legislative text and appropriations language gets on the books. And if this language is on the books, it's time to go home on mass deportations. It just will not happen.
The deportations are probably President Trump's most popular agenda item. It's something that the American people support. A minority of Americans and not even all Democrats are support this. Why? Why is House Appropriations doing this? And do you have any insight on which specific congressmen to be looking at who are behind this?
Yeah, so the Hill is hearing from the agriculture lobby, the hotel lobby, and other employers of illegal aliens on max volume. And, when max volume gets applied, it gets applied to leadership and the appropriators. And that's why there's such, the Appropriations Committee particularly is full of such weak Republicans. And so that's what they're hearing. They're hearing if mass deportations happens, you're going to, cripple these industries. We won't donate to you. We won't support you. And that's That's the life of an appropriations member right now. So they're folding. There's no other way to describe it. And it's up to the full House to basically say, no, this is our policy. We're not going to fold on it. And, to a certain extent, the administration's hearing the same thing. That's what we saw over the last couple of weeks when there was reversal upon reversal of, the prioritization argument as to whether farm workers would be off the books or not. And for a minute there, it looked like we had a sanctuary farm policy coming out of the Trump administration. Then it was reversed, and the carousel keeps going around. And so the administration and Congress needs to settle this question, and I think it's pretty easy. It's that everyone that's here illegally is on the table for deportation, and we're going to fund it and execute it with that in mind. And the goal is millions, because that's what the promise was to beat Eisenhower, who did 1.1 million with a much smaller illegal population. So they need to get into multiple millions very, very fast. Nowhere near that now, and they'll never get there with these priority categories. The only priority we need is mass deportation. Numbers, commas, millions.
When the Congress says to prioritize something, that seems like you could have an easy workaround. So yeah, okay, we'll prioritize that. We'll go with some known gang members are, but you can have a broader search as long as the money's in the bank. Or does this really tie the hands of the administration?
Yeah, no, it absolutely will tie the hands. There'll be, reprogrammings and such from the Appropriations Committee, endless pressure to use those funds in accordance, and potentially like litigation. And, I think if this were to get on the books, there's not a lot of way. There's always weasel room for it. But the bulk damage of it will settle in pretty quickly.
Well, mass deportations, deport them all. There's no asterisks there needed. It's all very clear. And yet, in Washington, D.C., they have to mess up what is a good thing. Mike Howell, great stuff as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right, don't go anywhere. We'll look at CNN and what they're trying to do right now with what's going on over in Iran, trying to get all the messaging, not actually what's happening in the real world. We'll have that right after this. Well, we see all the family farms shutting down, and it's not because, the meat in the grocery store, it's not coming from them anymore. It's actually coming from overseas. Over 85% of that so-called grass-fed beef that you see on the shelves is imported, and most people have no idea. That's why you need to look at goodranchers.com, because you're not just going through and buying meat. You're actually going through and supporting American ranchers and getting that top-tier quality, and you get the bonus of knowing where your food actually comes from. Good Ranchers, they only sell 100% born, raised, and harvested meat right here from local family farms. So you'll be able to taste the difference. The 4th of July is right around the corner, so don't settle for anything less. Celebrate America's birthday with 100% American meat. And if you subscribe today, you actually get your free pick of meat for the lifetime of your subscription. You can pick from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box forever. So use my code Jill at checkout and you get an extra $40 off. Visit goodranchers.com to shop American meat that you can trust. It's Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. CNN's Natasha Bertrand cited an alleged White House source claiming that the Iranian nuclear sites were left intact. But Pete Hegseth addressed this earlier, claiming that this CNN claim undermines national security.
There are so many aspects of what our brave men and women did that, because of the hatred of this press corps, are undermined because your people are trying to leak and spin that it wasn't successful. It's irresponsible. And folks in this room are privy to that information because of the proximity here in the Pentagon. It's an important responsibility. And time again, classified information is leaked or peddled for political purposes to try to make the president look bad. And what's really happening is you're undermining the success of incredible B-2 pilots and incredible F-35 pilots and incredible refuelers and incredible air defenders who accomplished their mission, set back a nuclear program in ways that other presidents would have dreamed. How about we celebrate that?
For more, let's bring in Kyle Shideler. He's the Director for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism at the Center for Security Policy. So, Kyle, thanks for joining us again, because it's almost insane that we go through and we see all these, the leaks, and then people at the Pentagon have to come out and say, no, this isn't exactly what it's happening. It's indeed the exact opposite. So why are we dealing with all these leaks? What's the motivation behind just the story that we're seeing unfold right now?
Well, what I think you're hearing is the last shuddering gasp of the Ben Rhodes echo chamber that was built up to promote a foreign policy of dealing with Iran that said the military option didn't exist. This was the cornerstone of the Barack Obama interaction with Iran. They insisted that you had to do a deal, and the reason you had to do a deal was because there was no military option. Now, they were always lying about that. But so now we are seeing, this infrastructure that was built many, many years ago by the Obama administration of bureaucrats, supposed foreign policy experts, supposed national security experts in bed with their journalist buddies, leaking, a tired narrative that frankly never had any legs.
So, excuse me. How often do you see these sorts of operations? It seems like with intelligence gathering, there's so much out there, and you could leak something that is completely sure. You could find another report on the same subject that's completely unsure. You could find things that are low probability or low assuredness of being correct all over intel, and they get leaked to press agents who, for years now, have worked as kind of a secondary arm of the Democratic Party or a secondary arm of the deep state, including Natasha, who was key in the Hunter Biden laptop. She was key in some of the Russian disinformation stories and has been successful, very professionally successful with it. How often do you see this? And is it always one way, or is this a weapon that's used by all sides to kind of craft media narratives?
Well, Chris, you know that Washington is a leaky ship, one way or the other. That's how they do battle in Washington. But I think, especially when it comes to Iran, this is, as I said, an echo chamber. This is a pipeline. This is a machinery of leaks that has been built over several years that only goes in one direction. You can go all the way back to the 2003 National Intelligence Estimate that the intelligence community leaked against George Bush back then to argue that the Iranians didn't have a nuke program. So this is a long time in coming, and we saw the leak prior to the strike on Fordo, where they insisted that the bunker busters could not do the job, and now they are insisting that the bunker busters did not do the job. So you can see the narrative at play here, and they're just continuing to peddle this stuff. And I think it was well disrupted by General Kane when he said, "Look, we built these things for Fordo. We know exactly what these things can do. They were built for this specific structure, and we know we hit our target."
How do you
don't have to be a great intelligence analyst to understand what he's telling you there.
How do you get to the bottom of these sorts of things? Are these sorts of reports widely circulated? Are they the kind of things that are only held by 10 different people? Is an investigation even plausible in this sort of situation? I know you can't speak probably specifically to this one, but in the general realm of intelligence leaks to reporters.
Well, I can tell you what I would do to nip some of this in the bud, and President Trump has done some of it, which is take away the classifications that the top secrets clearances that some of these former officials have. Because what often happens is individuals inside the bureaucracy will leak to former officials who still have a clearance, and therefore they can technically see the material. And those former officials then leak to the press. And so what you'll see if you read carefully between the lines, you'll see usually references to former officials familiar with the material, or individuals familiar with the material. It doesn't actually say where those people were from. And that is part of what allows them to widely distribute these things, so that it becomes very difficult to figure out who the specific leaker is. There's work that can be done to hunt down these leakers. It's a serious counterintelligence problem for the United States that we have bureaucrats that do business this way, that we have current and former political appointees who do business this way.
So we see Pete Hegseth, he's making a big deal of this for a reason, right? They're trying to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that they will go through and kind of call you out by name, basically, if you're going to keep doing this. But is this going to work for the administration, or as long as Donald Trump or any other Republican is in office, is this something that we're just going to have to keep dealing with?
Well, obviously, Secretary Hegseth has already been rattled with a leak situation before. A number of DoD officials were moved out after a leak investigation, and then he had the unfortunate situation with the Signal chat. So, I think information security is certainly forefront in Secretary Hegseth's mind here, and it should be for the entire administration. They're not going to catch any breaks here. They need to continue rooting out the bureaucrats that are against the administration. Just some of the longtime hardened, people use the term deep state. These who they're referring to, these bureaucrats that have policy ambitions, but they're not in a policy job. They're supposed to be carrying out the will of the president, but they don't. And so rooting them out, dealing with the clearances held by former officials from the Biden administration would be another good move. I think you can make progress, but Washington is always going to be Washington.
So what are some of the tools that we as reporters, we get leaked reports, we get leaked analysis, we get to look at these sorts of things and have to try and figure out what the real story is. If you're the reporter, you're expected to read it, for example, and maybe this is a low confidence assessment. But how can the audience and people who, as we assume, will continue to hear these things in CNN and the New York Times and other famous outlets for deep state leakers, how do they guard against this? How should you look at these stories when they come out? Is it just a question of cui bono, or is there a broader way that people can understand these?
Yeah, well, when I train interns here at the center, one of the things I tell them first is whenever you're reading anything you see in the news, ask yourself, who wants me to believe this? And once you can figure out who wants you to believe it, then you can move on to, is it true? And so often we skip that first step, but it's very important because the way that, groups like CNN play the game here, there was a real intelligence report. It really did say what they said that it said. They just left out some information that you needed to know, which was that it was a relatively low-level assessment in which they had low confidence, and that it did not include all of the intelligence that we later received over hours and days. So those are the kinds of things you need to ask yourself. Who wants me to know this? Why do they want me to know this? What aren't they telling me here? How sure are they? The world of intelligence is not a yes or no world. It's not a black and white world. It's a high level, high likelihood, low likelihood, low confidence, high confidence. It's shades of gray. So when you read something that says an intelligence report says absolutely X, you know that they're playing games with you.
Yeah, it seems like this is something that, they've done this since Russiagate. They've done this since the beginning. You just have to be careful over who's trying to tell you these things and why. And so many times we've been misled by reports, 9/11 Commission, all the way, or not the 9/11 Commission, but some of the WMD reports at the beginning all the way through and the different analysis we've had to deal with. So thank you. That's an important lesson I'll take with me to my reporters.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time, Kyle. We'll catch you next time. Don't go anywhere. We're going to head back out to D.C. Bedford's here, but don't worry. We'll get Rachel Bovard in on the conversation right after this. Donald Trump's signature big, beautiful bill just hit a major roadblock because Medicaid cuts targeted by conservatives were stripped out by an unelected Senate rule police. Now Republicans could be scrambling. So what needs to be done before the deadline on the 4th of July? So for more, let's go ahead and bring in Rachel Bovard. She's the Vice President of Programs for the Conservative Partnership Institute. So Rachel, thanks so much for joining us here today, because there's so much back and forth right now with this big, beautiful bill. Where do things stand right now, and what do Republicans need to get done?
So Senate Republicans are still in the process of what is colloquially referred to as the bird bath. and that refers to the Senate's Byrd Rule and how it applies to the reconciliation bill. The gatekeeper of that process, as you referred to, is the Senate's parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, who was hearing arguments from both Republicans and Democrats about certain provisions in the bill. Should they stay in? Should they stay out? Do they violate the Byrd Rule? And it's that process, although there's a lot of press releases and reporting saying she's determined this or she's determined that, that process is actually pretty iterative. It goes on for a number of days. She hears arguments, she gives feedback, staff are allowed to come back and re-argue certain provisions. So it's not over yet, but it is close because the Senate has a self-imposed deadline of beginning the process of considering this bill by Friday, potentially passing it over the weekend. And so if Republicans are going to tighten up these provisions, try to get a certain number of these Medicaid provisions and other areas to be affirmatively in the bill, they're going to have to do some work very quickly. But I do think that this creates a problem for them in the House because some House conservatives have already said, look, if the Senate parliamentarian is going to strike a bunch of these provisions that were very important to us, we're not going to be able to pass this bill, even if the Senate passes it back to us. So I do think there's a policy problem and there's a political problem, and the Senate doesn't have a lot of time to solve either one.
So this is more like strike one as opposed to out three for a lot of these different things. Are there people who have been already actively working on different ways to get these measures through, different wording, different styles of passing these actual policies or these budgetary decisions before they're rejected as backups, or does that work begin now?
Well, this is a lot of the frustration that some in the conservative movement have had because this does take a lot of preparation. This is going to happen, right? The bird bath is upon us and that it's coming. There's a date on the calendar where it's going to be. There's a lot of preparation that goes into this. And so this is something that, hopefully the committees and the Senate leadership have been preparing for. But it does seem like they've run up against some of these roadblocks and now they are scrambling to fix the language, come up with new arguments. So they do have time, to try to do this, but the time is pretty limited. And I think, like I said, they've got a policy problem because this language does need to be in the bill, and it's creating a political problem because they're losing votes rapidly in the House if this is not in there. So I think you're going to see staff working 24 hours at a time to try and get some of this language shored up.
So as I understood it, as some people have explained it to me, in order to make an argument that something is budgetary, you have to be able to show real serious impact over a 10-year period on the federal budget. So many of these billions and billions of dollars worth do that. So where could staffers be going wrong or committees be going wrong on this that allows the parliamentarian to say this may have an impact on the budget, but it's actually focused on policy? Or is she just reading into their hearts and saying, I think you're trying to trick me here with this budgetary thing. It's actually something you want to do policy related, the way that so many federal judges have read into the motivations or divined the motivations of the president and other members of the administration when they decided that things were legal or illegal?
So the Senate's Byrd Rule has a number of restrictions. Everything from, to your point, has to have a budgetary impact within the 10-year window of the budget. It can't touch Social Security, things like that. But where most of the arguments get hung up is that the impact of the provision is merely incidental to its budgetary effect. And so what that means is that it's the policy effect largely outweighs the budgetary effect. So this is the calculation that the parliamentarian is trying to make. Is this a policy impact or is it a budget impact? And so Republicans are trying to argue for their provision saying, no, the impact is exclusively budgetary and it's significant, right? It's not just incidental to the bill. It's actually a fairly significant impact over 10 years. Democrats, on the other hand, are trying to say, no, this is just Republicans trying to manipulate this process for their policy goals. This has absolutely nothing to do with the budget. There's no budgetary effect. And she is trying to take arguments from both sides and decide which one she finds compelling. Now, if Republicans are smart, they're presenting as best they can a strong budgetary impact for what they're trying to do. And in some cases, you can see how this would be clear. For instance, kicking illegal immigrants off of Medicaid benefits would seem to have a fairly large budgetary impact, but they really need to control their argument to weigh on the side of that budgetary impact and show that it outweighs the policy benefit of what they're trying to do. So it is a little bit of an art more than science. You are really trying to it is an adversarial process, right? You're arguing against the other side. And like I said, it's iterative. You can glean information from the parliamentarian. She'll say things like, oh, I don't feel like it's sufficient because it doesn't meet this X, Y, or Z. You can now take that information, go back, revise your language, and try to meet some of the criteria she's laying out. But you have limited time in which to do it. So there's a lot of provisions on the table here, and I think there's going to be some scrambling.
So, Rachel, when I listen to you and you say there's a policy problem, there's a political problem, all I'm hearing is delay, 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 right? This is what it's really going to come down to. But leave it to those in Washington, D.C. to put it right up against a holiday break. No, nobody in D.C. wants anything more than just to get out of town and go have their time with their family and, the barbecues and all whatnot. So break it down for us. How likely do you think this is going to be that the lawmakers in D.C. actually get something done by the 4th of July, if not before?
Well, I think the pressure to pass this bill is immense, right? Regardless of these different provisions that are in or not in it, the president wants this bill. He wants it by the 4th of July. So the pressure is on to pass it. If I had to guess, I do think that the Senate is going to try to move ahead with their deadline. I think they're going to try to vote to proceed to this bill on Friday, do the vote-a-rama over the weekend, pass it, by late Saturday, early Sunday, and kick it over to the House. The pressure is then going to be on the House because you have groups of members that only voted for the reconciliation bill because of certain provisions that were in it. Provisions that the parliamentarian has now struck related to savings in Medicaid, related to the IRA, the Green New Deal, pulling back some of those tax credits. Those are going to be problems for the House. So I do think it's a question of what happens at that point. If the Senate passes the bill, kicks over to the House has a couple of options. They can pass the bill as is, and I think there will be a lot of pressure to do so, or they can amend it and send it back to the Senate. That's what we call the ping pong. Or they can request a conference with the Senate. That's the traditional I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill way of resolving differences between the House and the Senate, is you go to conference. The latter two options will kick it past the July 4th holiday, but do give the chambers more time to resolve some of these policy differences. I think really it's going to be up to, what the White House decides, because the White House right now is putting immense pressure on the Congress to get it done by July 4th.
So you have members of the Senate like Tillis who probably wouldn't want to overrule the parliamentarian. You'd lose them if you tried to do that. But you also have people like Collins and Murkowski and McConnell who were there when McConnell last overruled the parliamentarian to get rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court justices after Harry Reid had done the same a few years earlier for federal judges. Is there a place where they can be pushed, where they might switch and say, you know what, this has gone too far, the parliamentarian's gone too far, we're willing to ignore the parliamentarian in this one? And similarly in the House, is there a place where those members are pushed, where there's no liberal member of the Republican Senate is taking out their shiny toy out of the bill, even if it's important? This is just the reality of what Republicans are able to pass, the majorities they have. The president needs it, so their back's against the wall, and they end up voting too. What pushes these members in both chambers to go against where they would naturally be inclined?
So I think, even to back up, the role of the parliamentarian, to the point that you're making, she is not an elected member of the body, right? She is a staffer. She works for the Senate Majority Leader. Her role is advisory. At any point, the Senate can decide the way that they want to interpret their own rules. Now, what she rules or her advice in many ways is controlling on the Senate because the members decide that it is. They like having someone they view as a neutral referee. They don't want to upend that process. But to your point, there have been various times in the Senate's history where the Senate has overruled the parliamentarian and said, no, this is how we want to move ahead. I do think, if there is a scenario where the parliamentarian has made a decision that is so at odds with other neutral scorekeepers, like the Budget Committee, like the Congressional Budget Office, like the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. And I do think if there's a case that can be presented to the Republican conference that the parliamentarian is so outside the bounds of what a number of other scorekeepers are saying, I do think in that scenario, it's a possibility that the Republican conference could be on board with saying, we disagree with the parliamentarian and we agree this provision is going to stay in, and they will take action on the floor to do so. The thing I think they have to be careful of is if you just explode and do away with the boundaries of reconciliation at all, then you're effectively nuking the legislative filibuster without nuking the filibuster, right? If reconciliation rules are meaningless, then you could just put anything in there and pass it at 51 votes. What's the point of the legislative filibuster? So it is a balance, but I do think if the parliamentarian is so far outside the bounds of what every other scorekeeper is saying, there is a chance here, I think, that Republicans can simply say you're wrong and we're moving ahead.
It's big. It's not necessarily beautiful, but it is the bill that we have. Rachel, thanks so much for your time. And you know what? I hope you have a good 4th of July either way, no matter what they do there in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
All right. We know that the Congress, they're going to do their best to hit the road for the 4th of July. But what are you guys doing this summer? When we come back, we'll take a look at some of the best replies for your responses on how to go around and travel throughout this great country of ours. Next. Well, Chris Bedford isn't the only thing that's hot this summer. Insert jokes here. No?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But I am actually extremely warm.
You are. It's okay.
We're in Texas.
But you know what? Even the New York Times, it's a feel-good story, right? When they have to go through and admit that all the fuel costs are actually looking better under Donald Trump, right? We were talking about all the CNN stuff. Guess what? The New York Times has to admit gas prices are doing well. So I posted on X that, you know what? Summer is here. Gas prices hit a 4-year low. So what's your big summer trip? Let's get right to your replies. Roy said, already done. Went out of state to visit family, but last year I visited LA, where I went to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, saw Dennis Quaid talk about the new movie, then swung by Dallas on the way home and stopped by the BlazeTV studios and the American Journey experience for a quick tour. Roy is going through and hitting all of my favorite things. Simi Valley, California, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library is one of my favorite places on earth.
Oh, that's the
Beautiful.
liberal institution of the Reaganites. That's where Nancy Reagan took all the treasures. You got to get out to the ranch in Santa Barbara next
true.
time, Roy.
It's true.
Talk to Young America's Foundation. It's private. They own it. But you can request a tour if you're in town and see if you can take a Humvee tour of the Ronald Reagan Ranch and see the conservative man that he was.
But he's buried there. It's a beautiful,
Oh, it's cool.
beautiful
It's
outlook.
beautiful.
It's incredible. If you haven't been there, I highly suggest you go. Jason, let's go ahead and get to him. He says, I sit in 100-degree heat and keep stats for my son's baseball team mixed in with a beach getaway to Hilton Head, South Carolina in August. Another good spot.
Yeah, there's a trick to 100-degree baseball games, and it's called spiking your thermos. It helps with all aspects. I strongly recommend it. It's sometimes frowned upon for morning games, but it's the weekend.
But if it's in a thermos,
Yeah, who knows, right?
don't know.
What's he drinking? Water? Coffee?
Probably coffee.
Vodka lemonade? You never know.
You never know. And to cap it off, we have Jim, who posted, about to take my kids on a road trip. No particular plan. We're just going to hit the open road and go where it takes us. That's not the way that I would travel. As you can tell, I like to know things before they happen. I don't like to just hit the open road, but I love that people are out there and they can just go have these spontaneous road trips across the country.
That stinks if you live on the 95 corridor, but in the actual parts of America, it's really fun to do that. I don't know how far we're going to drive today. I don't know how long we're going to go. Let's look at hotels. Let's look at campsites. If you bring a tent, like some of my friends have done. But you're a brave man, because I've done that with pals and maybe a six-pack at the end, but I've never done that with children. That might add a whole different realm to, are we there yet?
Are we there yet?
No, I don't even know where we're going.
What are the Bedfords doing? Are you going to hit the road?
Yeah, we're flying to Georgia. Going down to Marietta, and we're going to go, I'm not sure what yet. Sarah's father is not pro-illegal fireworks, but me and one of the other cousins are very pro-illegal fireworks, and we'll see where that takes us. I think we'll grill some meats and dropping my boy off for a week at Camp Grandpa, which is fun during the day, but at the end of the day, Mommy's not there to protect you. It's Grandpa, and that's an old school style of rules.
I love that. I would be team Grandpa in this one.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to fireworks, I hate them. Professional, or I don't want to be around you.
Have you ever worried about Communist Party affiliations or any other aspects of your past that
No.
might be troubling to
No, I just don't trust all of you out there with your fireworks.
Well, I'm gonna submit a criminal referral to you. I'm gonna be working with Mike Howell and the Oversight Project to get to the bottom of that.
You know what? I make fun of his Duke Blue Devils enough. He'll look into anything you want for that. I love, though, being from the Midwest. It's always one of these things that we get crapped upon all the time. They're like, oh, it's only 14 hours. Why don't you just drive there? Right? You said, oh, I'm going to fly down to Georgia. And I said, no, the Midwesterners would just drive it.
Yeah.
It's so close. It's not. But to us, everything is close. If it's not a 2-day drive, we're like, get in the car and go.
Everything is longer with a baby and a 9-year-old. The airport line at Atlanta Airport is unbearable with a 9-year-old, unless, of course, you want to turn him into a zombie with a screen, which I refuse to do. So that's a combination of he's got to keep himself entertained, and I have to keep myself sane. And at the end of the day, it's not bad to be able to turn to the stewardess and say, "Can I have a rum and Coke, please? I just got thrown up on by a 7-month-old baby." It's helpful.
So what's going to go on in D.C.? I look at Donald Trump. We had America 250 for the Army parade. I assume that the 4th of July with Donald Trump back in office is going to be pretty spectacular.
Trump's 4th of Julys are epic. And we used to do the 4th of July in Washington. It was really fun. Back in the day, if you had a White House, a Capitol press pass, you could take like 10 friends into the White Capitol, and you could bring a cooler of beer. And every year that we did this, the rules got stricter and stricter. So now you can't actually do any of that. And I'm confident that is the fault of me, Benny Johnson, and 20 of our best friends, maybe disturbing the family outing. But this time, Trump does a great patriotic thing every year, and I avoid it completely. I watch it on TV, and I grill in the backyard.
It's all going to start, though, in my home state of Iowa. America 250 is actually going to get kicked off on July 3rd. And I love just that Donald Trump is back in office for this birthday for America, because it means that it's actually going to be celebrated. And it's okay if you like your country again.
It's going to change the whole face of it. The 250th anniversary was going to be so sad and so weird, and it was going to talk about all these different groups that have been, like the contributions of transgender Americans to the founding. Can you believe they even call those guys cis? I mean, they did wear powdered wigs and high stockings. I don't quite get it, but this time, there's actually good people working on this celebration in Philadelphia, and it's going to be a patriotic explosion.
I just look at this and look at the potential impact that could be made on the entire generation that's growing up, like Christopher and everybody that is, just young kids right now that are taking a look around. And this has the ability to just go through and shape how they actually view the country, that it doesn't have to be, Barack Obama and a charter of negative liberties. You don't have to hear that constantly beaten down over and over.
It's wonderful. I mean, that military parade that everyone was freaking out about, it's going to be Soviet style. It wasn't. It was a civics lesson. It was a history lesson. And the uniforms and the people who fought and to see the historical aspect of it was such a phenomenal thing, to sit down with the kids and to sit down with friends of mine who served in the Army 10, 20, sometimes longer years ago, to look at that. It's like, oh, that's my unit, or that's the uniform that I wore. That was a wonderful thing.
And it's making going through and joining the Army something that kids will actually look at doing again. So thanks for watching, everybody. Bedford's going to head back to Washington, D.C. We'll see you, though, tomorrow.